Brian Preston is the Chief Judge of the Land and Environment Court of New South Wales. He's the author of Australia's first and only book on environmental litigation. His judgments have set new precedents in mining law. He has an abiding love for the Australian outdoors, and while teaching law, established the first field trip units the Legal Studies faculty has ever offered. Welcome, Brian, and thank you for being part of our Leading Lights interview series. Brian, we might just start with an explanation of what exactly is the function of the Land and Environment Court. What does it do?
It's the oldest environmental specialist court in the world. It's the most comprehensive jurisdiction of any environmental court in the world. Basically, anything you see in the paper about environmental matters, yes, bushfires, the floods, buildings, coal mines, freeways, all of those things, one way or another, come to the court.
How vital and how important is it in a time of climate change crisis?
The Environment Court has had a significant role in shaping both policy and law. So the court has made many significant decisions in relation to climate change. So one of the decisions was a decision of mine, the Gloucester Resources case up in Gloucester in the Hunter Valley, and that has been cited not only in Australia but internationally. There was a number of arguments that have been raised by the coal mining companies to perhaps deny the severity of the impact that coal mines are having. And the way in which the court went through responding to those arguments is what has had a precedent. I think it was the first time that in Australia certainly, a court has ever said no to a coal mine.
Or do you feel this is a great legacy?
Look, I think there is a legacy, but you make what you think is the right decision at the time. I was on the right side of history. At the time I gave the decision, there was a lot of response. So in the media, there was a concerted campaign and politicians, and it was quite unpleasant. But you can't be deterred by that. As I said, you've got to make what you think is the right decision.
So you weren't intimidated?
I wasn't intimidated.
Good for you. Good for you. Now, a Bachelor of Arts and Laws here at Macquarie University. Tell me about your time at Macquarie University.
Well, it's interesting you say Bachelor of Arts, because when I enrolled at Macquarie University, it followed the Cambridge University model, which was there was only one degree you could get at an undergraduate level, which was a Bachelor of Arts. The Bachelor of Law was the first exception. And so that had been introduced just about the time that I enrolled, and so there had been no graduates yet, but people were starting to do it. So I enrolled in the Bachelor of Law to go with the Bachelor of Arts. In the Bachelor of Arts, I did a whole range of subjects. I majored in the end of economics and accounting, but I also had a great interest in environmental science, so I tried that as well. But when I found that I was really doing an equivalent of 3 degrees, it was getting a little much, so I had to sort of pull back on a bit on what I was doing. So it was an exciting time to be in the law school, as I said, because there had been no graduates yet. They were still working their way through.
How many were in your year group, do you
think?
Look,
I think it was a little over 100, and maybe 110 or something like that. It wasn't big, nothing like the sizes that we have now. Yes. We felt a bit sort of pioneering group, and so did the lecturers. The mode of teaching was completely different. There were no lectures. It was all tutorials. You had reading materials that you had to read, and you got a class participation mark. That means that there was no cruising. You couldn't come in and sit there because you had to contribute to it. So you could be asked to be a lead discussion, you might be asked questions and do it.
You had to be on your toes.
Had to be on your toes. But you also had to prepare. Law is a social profession. We don't learn law to sort of leave it in the books. We learn law in order to apply it in practice. It's society. We've got to interact with one another. So you need to develop social skills. You've got to interact in that socialization in the law school. And that's why I'm quite opposed to what happened, necessity from COVID, where everything started going online. And I think that the universities have to insist upon in-presence. It's tough, but I think we can't give away that socialization process.
Yeah. What were the lowlights and the highlights of your time here?
Well, I think one of the things which I found challenging was in my first year. So if we think about Australia in the 60s and then pushing into the 70s, it was parochial, provincial, very Eurocentric, and it wasn't long since we had the vote for Aboriginal people, sort of recognising them. It wasn't long since we had got rid of the White Australia policy. And there was, of course, no internet. And so we were isolated from the world, from politics. And so when I came to Macquarie, I remember the first course, which is like Foundations of Law and Law and Society, those sort of courses. And the two lecturers I had were both Marxists and wonderful, especially one of them was, a really engaging person. But to me was going, what am I doing? What is this course? So it was a bit sort of, wow, there's a world outside of Kansas, Dorothy, moment. And so I think that was a challenge to get into that. But I think it was just perhaps the shock of the new.
And was it the same for everybody else in that?
I think so. I was talking to my wife, who also was in the same law class. We met there. And she was saying the same. She came, and there's even more for her because she came from a convent school. So, there are boys out there. But yes, I think it was for many who came. So that was a challenge, but a good challenge.
You have actually written up some courses for teaching in your specific specialty area.
Yes. I did my honours thesis in environmental law, and I continued to have an interest in that area and published shortly after I left law school. I subsequently, when I went to the Northern Territory, worked as an associate to a Supreme Court judge up there. I went to the Northern Territory because my wife was in the Northern Territory. Right. So we were going out during law school. I got a job in Sydney, she got a job in Darwin, working for the Northern Land Council in the early days of land claims. So there was only one piece of legislation which was dealing with the Northern Territory. She was engaged to take the women's evidence because women will not give their evidence to men, and so she was engaged in some of those early land claims as well as providing other legal advice up there. And on one of my visits up there, I was happened to be looking at the paper, and it had an advertisement for a job in the Department of Law, so I just sort of rang them up. They said, I know we put the advertisement in, but we actually have already filled the position, but we had to do that. But we do know of a judge who is looking for an associate. And so they then said, would you be interested in that? And I said, sure. And so then I went into that particular judge in my canoeing gear because I didn't have anything else, but I got the job there. And so I worked with him in the Supreme Court for a couple of years, and then we came back because of the founding the Environmental Defenders Office. And then when I was at the Environmental Defenders Office, I wrote Australia's first book on environmental litigation. In fact, it still remains the only book on environmental litigation. And so that was published later in the 80s, but I published a number of articles. And through my work with the Environmental Defenders Office, I was identifying where are the defects in the law and how we plug that. What arguments can be raised in order to overcome that. So there was a lot of those articles I was publishing at the time was concerned with improving access to environmental justice. And that then led into teaching. So I had started then to teach at Sydney University. I founded a number of courses. One became biodiversity law and another became environmental dispute resolution.
Did you do face-to-face teaching? Was it in the classroom type teaching?
It certainly was, but then if you're teaching a course like biodiversity law, if you know where Sydney Law School used to be, and so in Phillip Street, and so if you went down into the dungeons, the only wildlife down there, apart from the students, was cockroaches. So here am I trying to enthrall the students in biodiversity and the need to preserve it, and I thought, I can't do this here. So then I came up with the desire to run a field trip. So I had to put a proposal forward, and it went up to the faculty to decide that that could be done. We started off in campus teaching the basics, but what it was is, what were the legal instruments that govern the protection of biodiversity? And there are three levels. There are international, national and state levels. So what I then did is to take students to see how those laws were being applied in practice. For wetlands, we would go to a Ramsar, so the International Convention, the Ramsar Convention. There are wetlands dedicated, and one of the areas is up in Newcastle, where the Hunter Valley comes down, the Kooragang wetlands and all of that area.
Beautiful.
So we would go up, and then we would have a field trip. We would get ecologists and wetland ecologists come and talk to us, and about the process of, they had nominated for it to be accepted on the Ramsar Convention as a site. We also then went up into the Werrikimbe, what is come now, Werrikimbe National Park, which is part of the Gondwana rainforests. And so we would go up into the World Heritage Area. We would go and do night spotting exercises for endangered species of frogs and owls, and so they'd all have to go out at night, and we'd play callback tapes, and owls would come flying in.
Oh, how exciting.
Then we would get, for the state laws, we would get the people from the Forestry Commission, from sort of Land and Water Conservation, for private forestry, and they would go into the forest. They would have to do transects through the forest and prepare it. Then we would have our computers with all the data loaded, so we would then put in the data they'd collected, and that would then say, well, that is likely to be the habitat of this particular bat, or this owl, or the yellow-bellied glider, or whatever it might be, this particular frog that we would do. So it was all about sort of making the law come alive.
And can I say, were the classes filled?
Absolutely filled.
Yes, I bet.
There were various independent reviews of all of Sydney Law School's courses. It was ranked as the most popular course. And we had lots of international students come in to do that. That was a big, very
Fantastic.
popular one.
So, being so close to all of these kids, what are your observations? Are they evolving? Are they different?
I think they're more worldly. I think they have a much more global outlook. I think they have a greater political awareness. I think they're more anxious.
Really? Well, this is supposed to be the anxious generation.
Yeah. And
anxious about what?
Well, it could well be because they are engaged. They actually see the problems, where, in my naivety, were there problems? I didn't know. But I think they are more engaged. They're more worried about the future. They're worried about themselves. We all thought we were going to get a job. I mean, no one thought that when we did law, we weren't going to get a job. What sort of job? Well, we didn't know. But we didn't really think we wouldn't get a job.
But you think that is a concern?
I think they have a real concern. Because I think a lot of people now do law not thinking they're going to work in a law firm or in the law itself. So I think there's a very high percentage, certainly more than 50%, but people who do a law degree don't practice in the law.
It sounds like you don't have a lot of time outside of work, but are there hobbies outside of work? Do you have passions outside of the land and environment issues that you deal with every day?
A lot of them are related to nature, the environment. I've always been sporty. I like getting out, hiking, doing gardening, seeing the world, travel. So I try to combine those with things that I do. At the moment, I have a interest in art because I'm working on a project about art and the law.
How does that cross?
Environmental law is designed to try and solve environmental problems. It's not going very well. we are going backwards. So climate change, fires in America, in Australia, it continues to get worse. Biodiversity loss, the rate of decline is staggering. Pollution, chronic pollution, including plastic pollution, is going up. So everything we're getting worse. Yet that coincides with we've never had more environmental laws. We're not making inroads. We're going backwards. I said, well, instead of just doing the same thing, should we be trying to look at other ways of knowing? And that includes the aesthetic, the perceptual ways of knowing. So then I thought, well, who is looking at that? Artists. Artists are looking often at the same problems, but through different eyes and different ways of knowing. We sacrifice what we don't value. We're not valuing the environment. But if we can value it, well, how do you value it? Well, you have to appreciate it. What is it in the environment that is of value to us? Then we will save it. And so that's what we need to do. And so if I look at my career, I've worked as a solicitor, I've worked in private practice, I've worked in founding and public interest legal centres. I've been at the bar, I'm still academic teaching, I've still got I'm an adjunct professor at 3 universities in Australia, and I'm a visiting professor in the United Kingdom. So when I decide to retire as a judge, will I still be engaged in some way? Yes, I will still be engaged in some way, but I'll be finding different ways in which I can make a difference. Hopefully the world's a little bit better place by reason of what I've done.
Well, I'm sure it is. And thank you so very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.